Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I've done some previous videos on pay and archaeology in the past, but today I'm focusing on current events. How pay and the cost of living crisis is affecting regular working archaeologists and the future of archaeology in the UK. This is a matter that's really close to my heart, as one of the reasons I stopped working as a professional archaeologist was due to the wages. Before I get lots of comments about how everyone is having a hard time right now, yes, I am aware that many workers and professions are currently struggling financially in the UK and beyond. I'm not trying to play the suffering Olympics here today. I'm just trying to educate people on what things are like to work as an archaeologist in the UK right now. What inspired me for today's video is the Poverty Impact Report released in September 2022 by the British Archaeological Jobs Resource, also known as Badger and henceforth referred to as such, which is the #1 website for job advertisements in archaeology in the UK and also runs a pretty massive community Facebook group of archaeologists. I'm going to summarize and talk about the findings of the report and then also put it into a bit of context against the state of the UK archaeological market. Lastly, I will be covering the response of companies to this report, which will certainly be useful for you if you're about to start your archaeological career. All of the reports and documents I'm referencing today are linked in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself. And before we get into everything, please do subscribe to my channel to help show me your support and also to get notifications when I put out new videos. Also, I would really appreciate if you gave me a follow over on Instagram at rachellahman.digs. I am very close to 600 followers as of today, and I would really like to get it over that amount. Okay guys, let's dig in. The Poverty Impact Report was produced off of data from a survey that was conducted by Badger. It was publicly distributed. I think they posted it on their Facebook page and a couple other places. In total, there were 755 people who responded and answered the survey. This represents just over 10% of our workforce, as there are roughly 6,300 people working in heritage in the UK. It should also be noted that this survey came out before a doubling of UK household energy prices and an 11% increase of inflation going into Christmas 22. There are several takeaways from this report that I want to highlight, mainly the median, so the middle of the pack, net UK household income in 2021 was £31,400, and that comes from the Office of National Statistics. According to the Poverty Impact Survey, the average income for an employed single archaeology household falls beneath this median by around £8,500 to £12,700. That's like 20 to 40%. That's huge. Many of the supporting comments of the people who replied to the survey said that their partner's wage was higher than theirs, and them being able to continue to work in archaeology was reliant upon this financial support. Around half of the early to mid-career archaeologists, so people just starting out, to people that have done it for a few years, who are single or have children, were experiencing food poverty, which means that they could either be skipping meals or using food banks in order to cope financially, which I would like to say is something that I find personally extremely outrageous, especially if all of these people are working full time. Over half of mid to late career archaeologists, so people who've been working for a few years to people who've been in it for a long time, reported that their financial situation has negatively impacted their mental health. And for early to mid-career archaeologists, over 3/4 of them said that their financial situation was negatively impacting their mental health. This is really not good, especially in terms of recruitment and for people at the early stages of their careers. You know, how can we really expect to retain these people and for these people to want to keep working in archaeology if they're having such a bad time of it and it's having such a negative impact on their mental health? The survey had a comment section for people to anonymously speak about their experiences and situation. And within these comments, there were several repeated critical aspects of their working and financial lives that have contributed to their difficulties. There are several overarching themes of these comments: low wages / compensation and a lack of career progression lead to income stagnation, affecting abilities to plan for the future, things like house, kids, or marriage, and or pay off the debts that people typically start to accrue for their education. Another theme is that short-term contracts create emotional and economic insecurity. I entirely sympathize that. It's really sucky to not know where your next paycheck is potentially going to come from, or if you'll have worked enough this month to be able to pay your bills. One thing I found particularly interesting was people who weren't struggling as much talking about how luck helped them land a certain job early on in their career that benefits now, and or that they had a partner in a well-paid job, which is why so many people can afford to stay in archaeology. So that is the main takeaways for me from the poverty impact report. Now I want to talk a little bit about the archaeology market. Obviously things like low wages don't just exist in a bubble, and sometimes there can be good reasons why wages are low, especially if the overall market isn't doing well. Therefore, to put things a little bit more context, I had a look at the 2021 Archaeology Market Labor Report, which is produced for the Federation of Archaeological Managers and Employers, also known as FAME. I would have preferred to look at the 2022 report, but it's not been made or released yet, and I plan to do a video on it this year when it is. This report is produced every year, and it consists similarly of a survey that's sent to archaeological company managers, and then they fill in and send it back. There is no one obligating these people to fill this in, and some companies don't even fill it in all the way. They only answer certain parts. So it's by no means, it should be considered exhaustive. In 2021, it was sent to 107 organizations and had 41 of those organizations respond with answers. So keep that in mind when I'm saying all this stuff. The report I'm talking about today covers the year from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021, which is almost exactly the same timeline as the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it predates this Badger Poverty Impact Survey and the cost of living crisis by about a year and a half. The overall takeaway from it is that during that time, the archaeology sector expanded remarkably. Staff sizes, turnover, and profits all increased, which had a lot to do with the government protection of the construction industry at this time. In terms of this report, the key result takeaways I have from it are that the aggregate, so this is kind of like everyone all together, sector profit level was 7.1%, and the UK commercial archaeology sector was valued at about £247 million based off of this report and the responses. 85% of the commercial archaeologists employed at these 41 organizations that answered had permanent contracts of employment, and the respondents overall had increased their charge-out rates and reported increases in profits during the period covered by this report. And 2021 was the first time in this history of this report being produced where over 50% of the people who responded, 22 companies, had over £1 million in turnover. Most of these organizations answered a question saying that they expected the market conditions to improve in future, which, yeah, we'll see in the 2022 version if that's the case. 77% of the respondents either agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that they have had vacancies that they considered hard to fill within the period covered by the report. So they're struggling to find people to work for them. So what can we take away from these statistics? Clearly, in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, companies were doing well, some of them very well. And yet, about 4 months after this report was published in June 2022, out comes a survey from Badger, which is saying that their workforce, by and large, hasn't really seen a financial reward from how well the businesses were doing. To be fair to business leaders, there has been quite a bit of response to the publication of the Badger report. Several companies and big players like Cotswold Archaeology, AOC, MOLA, PCA, Oxford Archaeology, and Archaeology Southeast publicly announced that they're doing salary increases and or one-off cost of living payments for their staff. Although, as far as I can calculate off of their published figures, none of these match the increase in inflation, the 11% that the cost has gone up to live. And so this means that people are effectively still getting a pay cut. I also am sympathetic to the fact that many archaeological businesses are very fiscally conservative because of their memories of the 2008 recession and the market crash. And of course, if those businesses collapse because they go too far too fast, then people will be even worse off because they won't even have jobs. I'm also aware of the fact that because of the situation of the past year, businesses are now probably going to be tightening their belts because the cost of living crisis also affects their bottom lines as well. Personally, I think what they've done so far is a step in the right direction, but I also don't think it's enough. What really grinds my gears here is that it took companies being called out publicly by their community to institute these changes. They had increased their profits over a year and a half before September 22, and yet none of them made the effort to increase their wages more than above standard, which is especially annoying when you consider that 77% of them were having a hard time filling vacancies. Like, I wonder why. What I take away from this is that archaeologists are having to take a pay cut to continue working in archaeology when a lot of the archaeology companies as a whole have been thriving. There also additionally hasn't been anything done to address the current situation of brain drain, burnout, and lack of retention of staff once they reach the middle of their career and want to raise families and stop working away from home all the time. My entire experience with this is that people just have to suck it up, basically. And clearly that's not a mentality that's working. I am one of those people. I left because it just didn't seem like there was space for me anymore, that they cared about me and my future. And I know that I'm not the only one that's been in that situation and has left as a result. It's a pretty common trope to say, oh, you don't go into archaeology for the money, it's all about the passion, you have to love what you do, and you can't expect to make a decent living off of archaeology, etc. I've had people comment these things on my videos. Personally, I disagree, and I don't accept that way of thinking. Archaeology is a multi-million pound industry in the UK, and in my opinion, there is no excuse for why people working in archaeology, working full-time, supporting families, have to go to food banks or skip meals. It expects a lot of people to go into debt to get an education for it, and yet for some reason it's okay with them that their people are struggling. I personally don't think it's acceptable for that to be the case and for people to also be forced to go into food poverty to continue working in archaeology because they are so passionate about communicating and discovering heritage. I think that that's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that we've gotten to this point by accepting low wages, by companies accepting low fees, and now is the time for us to really come together and start to demand better conditions for ourselves. Previous generations have been able to work and live comfortably off of archaeology salaries. They've been able to start archaeology companies that are now the ones running the show. For a long time, my channel has been centered around giving advice to people wanting to carve out their own career in archaeology, and honestly at this point in time, I can't ethically recommend being a professional archaeologist in the UK. You are probably better off doing something else with your degree, because even if it's your passion, it's highly likely that you'll struggle to put food on the table in this economic climate if you're starting out as a single archaeologist and you can't rely on family or a partner to support you. It absolutely 100% should not be this way. It has not historically always been this way, and I don't really know if it's going to get better. I suspect that with the way things currently are in the economy, it's going to get worse, but I hope that I'm proved wrong. That's everything for today, guys. I know it's a bit of a downer video in comparison to my regular content, but I do my best to be honest and realistic with you, and this is how things are, or at least this is how I see them, and I know it's how a lot of people that are working within the sector see them. I will obviously update if things change. If you've watched this video and you are still considering a career in archaeology, first off, I want to wish you good luck. Secondly, I'm going to give you a piece of advice, which is to join a union and encourage your coworkers to join a union, because collective action is going to be probably the only way that you are going to consistently be able to pressure people and companies to pay you better. At least one of the companies that raised their salaries and their cost of living payments did so through negotiation with a union. And I think that going forward, we're going to see a lot more of that happening in archaeology. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Does this information surprise you? Does it not surprise you? Do you agree with me? Do you not? If you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And if you feel like it, share this video so that we can continue calling out these companies until they pay us what we're worth. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.